India is doing something that Washington, Beijing and Moscow are all watching very carefully. While the world keeps asking whether India is moving closer to America or closer to Russia and China, New Delhi appears to be doing something very different. India is refusing to choose just one side. And today, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is heading to Beijing for one of the most important India-China diplomatic engagements in years. So why is Doval going to China now? What does India actually want from Beijing? And could this be preparation for a much bigger Modi-Xi meeting? Let's understand the game. On August 24, 2026, NSA Ajit Doval is traveling to Beijing for the 25th round of India-China Special Representatives talks. He is scheduled to meet Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Tuesday to discuss the India-China boundary question. The mechanism itself goes back to 2003 and is designed to deal with the long-running border dispute between the two countries. And the timing is extremely important. These talks are taking place just weeks before the BRICS summit scheduled in New Delhi on September 12 and 13. China's President Xi Jinping is expected to attend, although his participation has not been officially confirmed. If Xi does come to India, it could create an opportunity for another direct Modi-Xi meeting. So Doval's Beijing visit may be more than just another border discussion. It could be part of preparing the ground for the next stage of India-China relations. Remember where India-China relations were just a few years ago. The Galwan clash of 2020 pushed relations into one of their worst periods in decades. Thousands of troops were deployed along the line of actual control. Trust collapsed. Military tensions remained for years. But since 2024, India and China have gradually worked toward de-escalation and restoring communication. And now, both sides are talking again. In August 2025, the previous Special Representatives round produced agreements covering border management, de-escalation mechanisms, trans-border rivers, border trade, and further talks. The two countries also agreed to hold the 25th round in China in 2026. In other words, today's meeting isn't happening out of nowhere. There has been a gradual diplomatic process behind it. So is India trusting China again? Not necessarily. And this is where India's strategy becomes interesting. India doesn't have to trust China completely to talk to China. In fact, great powers frequently negotiate with countries they don't completely trust. India's objective is not necessarily to become China's friend. It is to manage the competition. India wants peace and stability along the border because a stable border gives New Delhi greater strategic freedom elsewhere. And China has its own reasons for wanting stability. Both countries have enormous economic interests. Both are major global South powers, both are members of BRICS, and both want greater influence in the emerging international order. Even in June, during the BRICS National Security Advisors meeting in New Delhi, Modi and Wang Yi discussed advancing practical cooperation and maintaining the positive momentum in India-China relations. But that does not mean India is surrendering its strategic interests. Now look at India's broader foreign policy. India maintains a major relationship with the United States. America is important for India's technology, investment, defense cooperation, and Indo-Pacific strategy. But India also maintains deep defense and energy relationships with Russia. At the same time, India is engaging China, and India is strengthening its role in BRICS and the wide global South. Some people look at this and say, India is confused. I would argue the opposite. India is trying to maximize its options. Because in a world increasingly divided between competing power centers, choosing one permanent camp can become a strategic weakness. India's traditional concept of strategic autonomy is becoming even more important. New Delhi wants Washington to understand that India has its own interests. It wants Moscow to understand that India is not simply a Russian ally. And it wants Beijing to understand that cooperation is possible. But India's security interests are non-negotiable. That is not necessarily playing both sides. It is playing India's side. But there is a major problem. India cannot normalize relations with China completely unless the border remains peaceful. That is why Doval's talks matter. The border dispute stretches across roughly 3,488 kilometers, and the two sides still have major differences over the boundary. Recent meetings have emphasized maintaining peace, military and diplomatic communication, border management, and further negotiations. And India has been very clear on one principle: border peace is essential for broader India-China relations. So New Delhi can expand trade, diplomatic engagement, and multilateral cooperation. But it cannot simply forget the security challenge on the Himalayan frontier. This is the red line. China also has calculations. Beijing wants stable relations with India because confrontation with a major regional power creates additional strategic pressure. China is already dealing with intense competition with the United States. It has major economic priorities. And BRICS is becoming increasingly important to Beijing's vision of a stronger global south. A stable relationship with India can therefore be useful to China. But Beijing will also want India to remain cautious about deepening strategic alignment with Washington. And that is precisely where India's leverage comes from. India doesn't need to choose immediately. So when Ajit Doval sits across from Wang Yi in Beijing, don't look only at the border negotiations. Look at the bigger picture. India is simultaneously talking to China, engaging Russia, working with America, and strengthening platforms such as BRICS. That tells us something important about the emerging world order. The era when countries were expected to belong completely to one geopolitical camp is becoming harder to sustain. India wants relationships with multiple powers, but dependency on none. And that may be the real meaning behind Doval's visit. India isn't choosing China over America. India isn't choosing America over Russia. India is trying to make sure that India remains the choice that matters. The biggest question now is what happens if Xi Jinping actually comes to New Delhi for BRICS? Will Modi and Xi sit down again? Will border stability lead to broader economic cooperation? Or will the strategic mistrust between India and China remain too deep? One thing is certain, India's geopolitical game is becoming much bigger than choosing sides, and the world is watching. What do you think? Is India successfully maintaining strategic autonomy, or is balancing America, Russia, and China becoming increasingly difficult? Tell me your view in the comments, and if you found this analysis useful, subscribe to @ManishSirG for more deep dives into India's economy, geopolitics, and the forces shaping India's and the world's future.